Hello there, Michelle Shorts here for My Favourite Things. Today I'm creating a simple snowy backdrop using stencils and non-traditional colours. So let's get started. First of all, I have a panel of white cardstock here. This is cut to 4¼ inches by 5½ inches, and this is going to be my card base panel. I'm then taking the rectangle Extraordinaire stencil and I'm going to place that on top. So I have adhered my panel down with some low tack tape, and then I'm going to adhere the stencil down on top. I am using a huge amount of this low tack tape. This is post-it tape. I do reuse this multiple times, so don't worry, nothing goes to waste, but I really want to make sure that it's stuck down very well. I'm then taking the Drifts and Hills stencil, and this is going to create the illusion of a snowbank. Before I stick it down, I want to make sure that I've got enough space for my sentiment to be at the bottom and also for the image to be at the top. Once I'm happy with the placement, I'm going to stick that down as well. And once I've covered it with an inch of its life with a post-it tape, I'm going to start the ink blending. And I'm using Distress Oxides for this, for the sky. So what will happen is where that kind of Drifts and Hills stencil is at the bottom, that's going to create the illusion of a snowbank underneath, but I'm really just ink blending the sky portion. So I'm starting off with Seedless Preserves, and then I'm going to go into Picked Raspberry, Kitsch Flamingo and Dried Marigold. I really love using traditional colours for Christmas cards, but sometimes I really love to kind of just mix it up, and I really love purples and especially kind of blues and purples together, but I also really love pink for Christmas cards as well. I am adding some orange at the top, which is very untraditional, but I thought it worked really quite nicely with this blend. So that was the Seedless Preserves and the Picked Raspberry, and now I'm going in with the Kitsch Flamingo, and this is quite a bit lighter, so it is going to push some of that Picked Raspberry out, and then but I can go back and add that back in again afterwards. Here I'm just kind of mapping out where I want the colours to be, so I do go back in with the brush for the Picked Raspberry just to kind of blend that out, and then I'm going to go in with the Dried Marigold at the top. And like I said, this is really untraditional, but I think it works really nicely for kind of like a wintry kind of sunset type kind of sky image, I think anyway. Let me know what your thoughts are on non-traditional Christmas colours for Christmas cards. I really love to hear your thoughts. I do, like I said, really love still using traditional colours, and ordinarily I probably would go with a blue sky for this, but I thought it would be quite nice and work with the kind of reds and browns in the image colours as well. So I'm just going back through all of those different colours here just to blend them all together, finishing off with that Seedless Preserves at the bottom just to darken that up even more. Next, I want to add some splatter onto my background for snow. So I'm just adding a small amount of water onto my craft mat here. And then I'm going to mix in some Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White. This paint is really opaque and it's really great for snow in particular. I added way too much onto my craft mat. You really don't need a lot at all, but I'm just mixing it with a little bit of water just to slacken it slightly. And then I'm going to load up my brush with the paint, and then I can tap the paintbrush so that I get really nice splatters of snow for my background. I'm keeping the splatters fairly small in size, trying to keep them, you know, not uniform as such because I want them to be random, but ideally I wanted them to be fairly small. And next, the best part of any stenciling is that you get to remove the stencils and see what's underneath. So I'm just taking my time here just to remove all of that tape that I added on top, but I'm going to get a really nice crisp kind of outside edge, and I think that's because I use so much tape. So I just really love that crisp white outside and then the bright kind of sky on the inside. So I'm going to set that panel aside to dry while I work on my image. So this is the Jingle Hugs stamp set, and I've stamped the image onto some smooth white cardstock with extreme black ink. I'm going to colour the image with Copic markers. So I've got all of the colours there on screen with the caps. I'm going through colouring everything from darkest to lightest. That's just my preferred way of colouring with Copic markers. All of my Copic actual markers are to the right hand side of me, so that's why my arm keeps going over there to pick up the Copic markers. I do have a piece of scrap paper to the side of me as well. I like to test some of the Copic markers before I bring them to the image. My E11, for example, was quite overfilled. I didn't fill it, that's how it came, and it's a little bit blobby, and so I like to kind of remove the excess. And then some of the markers were a little bit dry, so I wanted to figure out if I could still use them a little bit dry or not. It's not ideal, but sometimes I find that I get quite nice results when they're not completely filled, which isn't right, but sometimes that happens. So I did just want to mention here that I've shared in other videos before that I do struggle to colour on screen now. I used to be a lot better, but as time's gone on, my eyesight, although it's not worse, it's slightly different, and so I find that I really have to lean over when I'm colouring stamped images, and so that's not great obviously for filming. So on a couple of the occasions I do go outside of the lines, but I will try and fix that a little bit later. But for the time being, I've left all of the colouring in. I've just sped up portions of it. This did take me about 40 minutes to colour, so I've tried to condense it down to about 5 minutes. I'm going to play some music so you can watch while I colour. Once I'd finished colouring, I'm then going to go in with the colourless blender and I'm just going to push some of that colour back into the image, and it seemed to work quite well for this image. I'm then taking the Jingle Hugs Die-namics and I'm just placing that over the top of the image, and then I can adhere that down with some low tack tape and run that through my die cutting machine, and that's just going to cut out that image beautifully, and I can just use a pokey tool just to get rid of the inside pieces. Such a cute image. I'm then making sure that my sentiment is going to fit where I want it to at the bottom, and just kind of placing my image on top just to make sure. I'm then taking my panel here and I'm going to add a piece of transparent plastic over the top. This is so that I can stamp my sentiment and it not actually be stamped onto the panel itself, but I'm just going to make sure that I'm stamping it in the right place. So I placed the rectangle Extraordinaire stencil over the top just to help me with the placement of that, and then I stamped that down onto the plastic and made sure that it was straight and exactly where I wanted it. As it turned out, it was, so that I could stamp it then down onto the panel itself, and I stamped that twice just so that I got a really nice dark impression. The panel is almost dry at this point, but not 100%. So instead of adhering the panel onto the card base, I'm going to add the adhesive onto the card base and add the panel on top. Because of this, I've added some tape runner, and then I'm just using a bit of glue stick. That's just going to give me a little bit of wiggle room to make sure that I adhere the panel on straight. Once it's straight, I'm just using a bone folder just to make sure all of those sides are well stuck down, and then I can grab a piece of scrap paper and use that to press down the middle of that panel just to make sure that I don't move any of that white paint. I've then added a lot of foam tape onto the back of my image here. Because I post all of my cards through the mail, I want to make sure that it's not going to crush too much, so I do use quite a bit of foam tape. So I'm just going to place that on top where I want it to, and it looks like the characters are standing on a snowbank even though there's no snowbank there. I thought about adding embellishments onto the card, but ultimately decided that I quite liked it as it was. But I'm going to add some black glaze pen onto the eyes of the reindeer. Just going to add kind of like a sparkle and make them pop. And then I can add some crystal glaze onto the bells. So the one on the hat there, and then also the bells on the reindeer's collar. And then I'm also going to add it onto the nose as well, because I thought it'd look quite nice to have that nose sparkle. Just turning it upside down here to make sure that I don't get my hand in the other glaze that's already wet. And so that's the card finished for today. Really quite clean and simple, but I do really like having that non-traditional colour for the sky. Links to the products that I used will be in the description bar here on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.